So that's why we can't talk about this exploit with everybody yet, because, oh my God, everybody's going to freak out. So we need to keep this between ourselves. So no talk about that exploit once we start the broadcast. Okay, everybody?
Yep. The code is out there.
Are we started? Oh, hi.
Oh man, hi everybody, and thank you for joining us today for another Active Countermeasures webcast. As we like to say, happy time zone, because we never know what time it is where you are. Today we're going to be talking about how to get your career started in cyber threat hunting, but we're going to start talking about that at the top of the hour. If this is your first webcast with us, welcome and thank you for being here. We always like to do a little bit of a pre-show banter before we get started with the actual webcast. It's a great way for us to get to know you guys and for you to get to know us on a little bit more of a, fun and personal level.
And I think everybody should send Shelby an apology for having to deal with the rest of it. Because, oh my God, what that poor girl puts up with.
Yeah.
No.
So just in Discord, Shelby, I am so sorry for you.
Yeah.
It could definitely be
like
a lot
a never-ending task, not like a crime job or something, just continual.
I'd rather put up with goofy than mean. So.
Oh yeah.
They're good. There we
And
go.
for anybody who isn't on our Discord, since we have mentioned it, I'm going to post a link to it inside of the GoToWebinar chat. We have a Discord threat hunter community. So it's not technically a company server. We like to call it a threat hunter community because it's just a place to talk about threat hunting. We have a ton of different channels around threat hunting, around different open source tools, tool development, and then near the bottom of the Discord server, we have a section for active countermeasures. One of those channels is the live webcast chat channel, which is where we're hanging out today. That's the channel that has the big red button. So you can find us in there. And then right below that channel, you're going to see ACM webcast content. That's going to have the slide deck for today. If for whatever reason you can't join us on Discord, that's totally fine. We do definitely recommend being there. But if you can't, we also have the slide deck in the handouts in GoToWebinar as well.
We especially like the Discord side because that means that when you've got a question, everybody gets to help out rather than just one or two people on the back end who probably didn't know the answer to start with anyways. So
exactly. Because quite frequently we don't know, but somebody does.
Absolutely. And we love that everybody can help each other out. Please use this between webcasts as well. This is a great chance to talk about the projects you're working on, ask questions about a tool, find out if a particular process exists already or if somebody's got sample documentation that can save you 4 or 5 hours of writing. It's a great place to share what you know and learn from each other. Please take part if you can.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you're here, it's because you want to start your career in threat hunting. And being part of a threat hunter community Discord server, I think, is definitely a great step in that direction. There also is different LinkedIn channels, mentoring channels, career channels. I know I've seen a couple job postings in there. So definitely recommend joining our server.
Thank you to everybody who's posted an available position. If you need the help, this is the right place to ask for it. Absolutely.
Although I'm a little nervous, Shelby's noticing job postings.
Right.
They're technical jobs, though, so nothing I could be too useful for.
Oh yes, you could. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I've definitely sat through enough trainings at this point. I've started to actually collect the information. So
Exactly. Yep. It takes a little time. That's all.
the one benefit of running the back end of these things is you get to actually, hear the presentations every time.
We had a pretty good question in Discord. So what got each of you into the hackerspace, AKA, what was that thing that caused you to start pursuing this stuff? Let's go by age. Bill, you go first. You're the most immature.
Oh, yes, definitely. I'm negative points on that one. That was an AT&T computer that had 256K of RAM, and I was desperate to learn how to get more memory so I could do something functional. And then the networking side of it came out of trying to share an internet connection with an office of about 70 people all going out to the internet over a 14.4 modem. And that was on my laptop, and figuring out how to share that connection. And it took forever to explain to the other people there. I didn't have to do this, but so many people were asking, like, how come we can't get to the internet? It's because Bill's not here. Well, why can't we just get to the internet? Because we go out through his laptop. Well, can't you just turn on the internet? No, Bill's not here. and it worked. It was amazing to me that it worked at all. But when you've got something that slow, it forces you to get really smart, really fast about networking, because you can't just let people go and watch videos all day on a 14.4 modem.
So, Bill, what you're telling me is that there was a time way back in history that you were the internet enabler as opposed to the internet destroyer.
Yes, and I've slowly merged into the other role. I sent out a piece of software that's under development. You'll hear more about it within a couple of weeks. But I sent out a piece of software that's in development to two of our business partners. Both of them report that their virtual machine architecture died. One had a RAID array fail. The other one, the drive ate itself. And I'm going back over that code. What did I stick in there?
Oh, did you send them Windows 95 again, Bill?
Oh, yeah. os.systemwin.exe. There we go.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
Keith, what got you into this stuff?
Initially, it was my first computer, which was a Texas Instruments TI-99 4A, which used a cassette tape as a hard drive.
Yep.
And after spending almost a week writing a basic language program just to make a square cursor move around on the display screen. And after that, I was just hooked.
Oh, yeah.
Weekend writing different programs. And as far as networking, I think it was when I got my first copy of Windows 3.1 that actually had networking in there, and that was the first time I actually had a connection to the internet, which was not much of an internet at the time. I think that was 97 or so. So it was kind of on the cusp, I guess.
Hey, the web existed by then, so technically it was.
Yes. Yeah, it did. It was very ugly, but it existed.
So for me, it was two things. So how old is Chris? I am so old that back in high school, when I was taking computer class, we used an old IBM Mini that took punch cards. And
Yes.
I figured out somewhat accidentally that if you punch the holes the right way, I could crash the computer. And it took so long to reboot that the teacher would just give it to us as a study period. So anytime I wanted a study period during that time, just, plug in that card I had, and that would crash the system. And I just act like, I don't know what just happened. That would get me the rest of the class off. Segue to many years later, this is probably like early 90s. I was a consultant. I got teamed up with someone who was a quote unquote security expert with 20 years of experience to do a red team test on a insurance company. And before he could actually figure out how to get onto their network and talk to anything, I already had console access to every one of their netware servers. When the guy walked over to, so the guy I was with was like, this guy who was our handler came in and said, "Hey, do you need any help?" And the guy I was with said, "Yeah, I can't connect to the network." And he had to spend like 15 minutes just show him how to find the login prompt. And then he came over to me and said, "Do you need any help?" And I said, "Yeah. Is it okay if I type down here?" And he looks at my screen, and I've got the main console up for their primary netware server. And he's just like, "Oh my God, no, don't do that." So yeah, the attention I got from that, I'll admit I was a little bit of an attention whore. I thought that was fun, and that kind of got me into security. So.
Wow.
So what you're telling us is everything you know about computers and networking is how to crash them.
Exactly.
This is why we need you in QA.
Yeah. Well, and the fun is getting it back up.
Yeah.
I mean, it's equally, or well, not equally, but it is fun taking things down. But to me, the joy is figuring out how to get it to work again.
One of my first computers was a Sinclair 1000 that I bought at a grocery store.
Wow. Oh,
and
man.
then proceeded to turn it into the brain for a robot arm, which was part of my senior year project in high school.
Wow.
It's ironic because one of my first ones was the Timex Sinclair ZX81, and I think those were sister computers. Again, with the tape drive. Nod to my friend Keith. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, and I remember you didn't back it up to a single cassette because a lot of times your backup would fail and there was no way to know it failed. So I always had like 3 different tapes I would back up to in the hopes that maybe one would still work and one would restore the code. And that did not always happen.
Yeah, one you accidentally taped Saturday Night Fever over or something, so.
Yep. Setting up a RAID array of 72 tape drives, it takes so long to load all the tapes.
Oh, yeah, right. I don't know. It's kind of fun to look back, and those that did not live through those times. I mean, it's fun to kind of research and look back, even just looking on Wikipedia, and just looking at the history of how we, arrived where we are is pretty cool.
Yeah, I think a good point out of that too is for anybody who's just starting, who's like going through the content we teach and stuff and is like, oh my God, I don't know how I could ever learn this much. I don't know how I could ever be like, try and become as smart as like Bill Stearns. It's good to remember we were really stupid once. Go back and find like mailing list posts I made in the 90s. I run across them on occasion and I'm like, oh my God, was I dumb? I didn't know that. That's basic. Oh my God.
Oh yeah.
How did I even have a job?
Actually,
my Sans Practical paper is still up there somewhere, and I had to admit a little bit of confusion between the urgent flag and the urgent pointer. I couldn't quite figure out if there was a difference or if they were the same thing.
All right, and I think this would be a good point to mention that this is not the actual webcast yet.
Oh yeah, it is. We're almost done.
Yeah, the actual.
Like I said, everybody tells Shelby, I am really sorry for you that you have to deal with them.
Yeah, right.
So
well, I was just thinking our
Chris.
next pre-show banter should be text-based.
And May said, don't be rude to Shelby. The creepy doll will come at you at night.
Yes.
That is true.
Oh, yes, it will.
Yeah, Shelby, you're getting called out for not saying how you got into this.
I was hoping I would just kind of slide by that.
I kind of figured you would. That's why I didn't call you out on it. But somebody brought it up in Discord, so Discord must speak.
So while people fill in the answers for Bill, I guess I'll take care of that. So I like to say that I was actually kind of born into this community. For anyone who doesn't know, my father is Chris Brenton.
Is an a-hole.
Yeah.
A pain in the ass.
So that meant I grew up with a Sans instructor for a father who, worked from home remotely in his office right next to my bedroom. And these kind of geek conversations that are our pre-show banter hours were our dinner conversations when I was growing up. So this whole community of people, the InfoSec kind of community, that's just family to me. And, although I am not really a technical person, I do, understand a lot of the stuff, but I couldn't hold a conversation with Chris or Bill or Keith probably. But, I love the people and I really couldn't see myself working in a different industry.
Good for you.
Yeah, the people are a lot of fun. So that's kind of how I got my start, was being born into it.
That's awesome. And I just got this vision of growing up in the Brenton household where you can't get up from the table until you finish your PCAPs.
Yes.
Cute little family story around this kind of stuff too. Like I said, Chris's office was right next to my bedroom growing up. And because Chris is who he is, and like most people in this industry, he's working at all hours of the day and night. When I was a kid, I would always feel comfortable when I would see the glow of his laptop pass by my room, because I would know that meant he was going into his office to work late at night. So I'd have my dad in the room right next to me. So
Oh,
I never heard that story before. That's cool.
yeah,
very sweet.
yeah.
I'm glad I was more than just annoying.
Yes. Yes, you were a good example in some areas. So
May's asking if you went to sleep to the mechanical sound of the clicky clicky on my keyboard.
yes, yeah, that was another familiar noise. Not only that, but your office chair. When you would sit in it, like sit back a certain way, it would make this click noise. And that noise is stored in my head as being like a soothing noise as well.
Oh, that's awesome. That is
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, it's the little psychological things that are really funny like that. Toonie UK said the whole family is watching tonight. Cybersecurity engineer, InfoSec architect, threat intelligence analyst, and computer science student. We're all watching on the big screen.
Oh, that is awesome. That is
Yeah.
awesome.
Oh, you
So
guys.
Toonie, if you're worried about messing your kids up with this, hey, look at Shelby. She's more adjusted than I am. So
Yeah, absolutely. Well, make sure,
That is
even though
really
you're
cool.
watching it on the same
Oh,
screen, that you all sign up for it, so you all get certificates, okay? all four of you register.
And this industry needs more people, so this is awesome.
yeah,
Perfect.
If you have any interest in this and all, go for it.
yeah. One of the other classes I teach is security leadership, and that is a part of the class on which is, hey, so an executive assistant, what security job would be perfect for that person? Hey, a waiter or a waitress or a bartender, what would be a perfect security job for that person? Just because I do like to teach people who are in management roles, stop with the initial crap on resumes. I mean, in some cases it's important, in others it's not. There are other job roles that can bring new, unique ideas to security to solve problems that we really need. So yeah, if you're coming in from another field and you're thinking, wow, I'm not sure about the security stuff, thank you, because we definitely need more security people. And on that note, hey, let's get into it. So
Yeah.
Thank you, Chris.
thank you, folks. Very much appreciate it. So let's get into the slides. First, I want to say thank to our sponsors, Active Countermeasures. We're hosting this. But, hey, everything we do is done with the help of Wild West Hack and Fest and Black Hills. So thank you, folks. Very much appreciate it. So why threat hunting? There's a bunch of different security disciplines out there. Why threat hunting? This is really new. And, part of being new kind of makes it part of the cool kid crowd, which is kind of nice. I found that probably more than any other discipline, you really have to establish groundwork when you're talking to somebody about threat hunting. By that, I mean, I've had a lot of conversations about threat hunting with people where they're talking about something totally different. So threat hunting is that new. We're still kind of coming up with industry standard definitions on that. But the market is exploding. We used to do these a couple of years ago. We'd get a couple hundred people interested. And now when we do these, we get a couple thousand people interested. I think that really kind of says a lot right there. Because it's new, it's hard to find seasoned people for threat hunting gigs. Somebody sent me a job posting the other day that was looking for a threat hunter with a minimum of 5 years experience. Yeah, good luck with that. They don't exist. This did not exist more than 5 years ago. In fact, it's kind of there's typically kind of a process, right? Usually new skills kind of cycle through consulting companies and then kind of push out to companies themselves. So if you need a certain new skill set like threat hunting, a lot of times you need to turn to consultants for that. One of the nice things about threat hunting in that aspect is the billing rates right now are astronomical. If you think about like what can you charge for red teaming, penetration type testing, the going rate, if you're really good right now, is about $200, $225 an hour. I've seen threat hunters billing $800 an hour, and the customers are actually much happier at what they get out of it at the end of that. So that's kind of cool. Also, this is a very diverse discipline. You need to be able to draw on a bunch of different skills. So it's a nice way to kind of round out your security knowledge. The big one for me, what really dragged me into it, was this to me is our biggest problem in security today. When you look at what happens when our protections fail, we've got tools to try and keep the adversaries out, But what if they all fail and the adversary gets a beachhead? The amount of time that's going to go by before they're detected, industry average based on all the studies that are out there is 6 months or more. Further, when they're finally detected, it's probably going to be by an outside third party. So we have stuff to try and keep the bad people out, and we have response technology to deal with them once they're in. The gap is figuring out when the protections failed and we need to go into response mode. And this is the problem that threat hunting addresses. So what is it not? I mentioned that, I mentioned having conversations with people about threat hunting, and they're not talking about threat hunting. What is it not? Well, responding to alerts. This says EDR software, but really any type of alerts that go off. Responding to alerts is reactionary. Threat hunting is proactive. It's something you go out and do, not because you have an inkling there's a bad guy on your network. It's because, hey, this is what we do. We check all of our systems. We go through and we do an analysis to identify that all of our systems are currently in a safe state. So if you're just responding to alerts, that isn't helpful. If you just write signatures, that's not helpful. One of the things I got a real kick out of was when Sunburst hit, about a week, within a week after the announcement, there were all these tools saying, oh, hey, we catch Sunburst. Oh, thanks, guys, too late. In other words, if you didn't have a tool that could catch Sunburst in the summer, it didn't do you any good. By the time they wrote a signature in December, when everybody found out about it, that was a dead channel. That was when you got to stop worrying about Sunburst and start worrying about the next thing that's coming down the pipe. So, writing signatures, no, that's not threat hunting. Or checking dashboards, or, seeing if you're talking IPs on a threat intel list. Those are all reactionary activities. Threat hunting needs to be proactive, as I said. So, if you've been doing it for years, it's probably not threat hunting. These are really new tools and techniques that we need to leverage to make this happen. One thing I see a lot of is vendors saying, oh, hey, buy our AI software, we'll take care of the problem for you. We'll go through and threat hunt the network. Oh, give me a break. What is artificial intelligence? Artificial intelligence is software programmed by people to try and stay within the guardrails. So it's analogous to me of like launching a rocket ship into space. Well, what if there's like meteors in the way that we don't know about? Well, you're going to crash, right? Because you've tried to program things in advance. So, AI can be to some extent self-learning, but it's kind of like that 5-year-old self-learning, meaning that it's going to learn things you don't expect it to. And a great example of that is at Tanya and You. If you're not familiar with this, do a little Google searching. It's pretty funny. So Twitter came up with a chatbot based on AI, and they released it into the wild. And it was basically a Twitter handle. And you could communicate with that at Tanya and You, and the AI would figure out how to respond to you. Within 16 hours of the first release, it turned into the most foul-mouthed, racist entity you've ever met. Some of the quotes that I felt comfortable enough to put onto a slide without annoying too many people are shown here. There were worse posts from this thing. It didn't even last a day, and they had to take it offline. And then they spent some time tweaking and tuning and doing all this stuff, and they released it again. And the second time, I think it only lasts 2 or 4 hours. Well, I want you to think about this. Chat, communication, conversation with other people. This is something that we as Homo sapiens have been doing for hundreds of thousands of years. And yet somebody tried to write software to keep that within the guardrails, and they couldn't do it. And it wasn't some high school project or something like that. This was Microsoft. They got some resources there, right? And yet it still went off the rails. Now, the good part about Taya and You going off the rails is you can see it. When they start saying things like, hey, I'm smoking kush in front of the police, someone can look at that and say, this bot, this AI is not responding the way I expected it to. This is bad, shut it off. Well, what if the AI is trying to protect your network? What if it's trying to find adversaries on your network and it goes off the rails? There's no, nasty language for you to see and say, hey, this has gone bad. It just doesn't tell you anything. So AI could be missing what's going on and you're not the wiser. So I know it's really tempting to kind of buy into a vendor that says, oh, hey, just buy our AI software and don't worry about it. Because, hey, it'd be nice if we didn't have to worry about it, right? The problem is, until we get really good at doing this ourselves, we can't hope to program software to do it for us, because we need to be able to teach it how to handle this correctly. Now, language, like I said, 200,000 plus years, and we're still having problems getting the software right. Maybe it'll be about as long for security. I don't know. We'll see how things go. So what should threat hunting be? Like I said, this is a proactive activity. This is, I'm going to assume, I'm not going to make any assumptions about whether my network is safe or currently compromised. And I'm going to go through and do a compromise assessment of every device that connected to the network, everything, not just end users' workstations, because we tend to kind of focus on that and forget about everything else, right? What about the IoT devices? What about the IoT devices? What about the network hardware? All of that stuff really needs to be checked as well. We need to be able to do an assessment of our entire organization, everything connected to that network, and identify, is it in a compromised state, yes or no? That's really the goal of threat hunting. Let's see, Raj says, is malware analysis, is that a subset of threat hunting? Yes and no. I would say lean probably more towards no. Malware analysis is an understanding of malware that already made it onto your network. That I would put that more in a forensics category than I would in a threat hunting category. So again, if you think about that definition I gave you, the purpose of threat hunting is to figure out when your protections have failed and you need to go into response mode. Does analyzing malware do that for you? Well, no. Threat hunting could be trying to figure out if there's malware on your network to begin with. But once we've identified, hey, I've got a system in a compromised state and it has malware on it I've never seen, that's when the analysis portion would kick in. But to me, like I said, that's more of a forensics type activity. Almost all of that AI is abnormally detection. Yeah, so we can write signatures. Certainly, we can go in and go looking for the stuff we understand. But now we're just responding to alerts. And again, that isn't really threat hunting. That's part of our protection suite, not part of our do we need to go into response mode suite. So threat hunting, gave you a general definition. So what does threat hunting look like? Typically, this is a hunt of the network to see, are any of my systems act in a manner that looks like someone else is controlling them besides us? Give you a great example. With our commercial product AC Hunter, back when we were in alpha phase, we had an early customer come in, deploy the software out on their network. They came back about 2 days later and said, hey, we're seeing something weird. Can you check it? Can you look at this with us? And what they had detected was 3 internal IP addresses that once per minute were doing a connection to an IP address in Guangzhou, China. Seemed to be sending a little bit of data, a couple of megs, they would shut down, and then a minute later it would go through and would connect again. And we looked at that and said, well, do you have a field office in Guangzhou, China? No. Do you have a business partner in Guangzhou, China? No. Are you using any software that needs to call home to Guangzhou, China? Not that we're aware of. Okay, then yeah, this is something you really want to go in and pay attention to. Turned out their facilities team had bought 3 IP-based cameras off of Amazon, mounted them in different places within the facility, and they came pre-compromised by the manufacturer at no additional cost to take pictures of the inside of the facility and send that off to Guangzhou, China. Oh, I hate it when that happens. But these were cameras. You can't run EDR software on them. They didn't have any syslog facility to them. And oh, by the way, they had been on the network for a couple of months already, the first time they went through and did that threat hunt. So again, the whole purpose, the starting point on threat hunting is looking for that persistency of connection, looking for, hey, do any of my systems seem to be having a constant conversation with system or systems out on the internet that I can't explain away as part of a business need? Abnormal protocol behavior, that's another popular one. Hey, if I see traffic going out to the internet on TCP 443, but there's no SSL client hello, there's no SSL server hello, there's no digital certificate exchange, that's somebody tunneling data. That's somebody who's hitting that port just because it's usually open. That's probably something you want to go in and pay attention to as well. And for all of these, it's not just a matter of identifying the communication. It's running down, is there a business need for that? Once you identify suspicious activity on the network, a lot of times you need to then pivot into host-based logs. We try to go through host logs, straight away a lot of times. Like, a lot of folks will like run an elk stack and say, well, if any of my systems run PowerShell, then, send me an alert and I'll know that some attacker got in. And yeah, that's a great signature to have. But you know what? Not every attacker is going to directly leverage PowerShell. We've seen backdoors calling home using notepad.exe. It's not the notepad that ships with Microsoft, but you don't know that until you run an MD5 hash comparison or a SHA-1 hash comparison. So again, you can't just write a host-based signature. But if I see an internal system that's beaconing out to the internet, and then go look and see that it's Notepad making that connection, oh yeah, that's enough to let me know I need to go in and run this to ground. I've got a serious problem I need to pay attention to. So again, this is not necessarily about pulling apart the malicious code or anything like that. We have response tools for that. We have ways to go through and deal with that. It's simply identifying, hey, our protections have failed. We need to go into response mode. I know that sounds simple. That's a nice, simple definition. But the totality of what that encompasses, really is a full-time job. So when you look at how do compromised systems communicate back to their command and control channels, there's some commonalities with them. There's some level of persistency of connection, meaning that this system is going to be in constant contact with one or more hosts out on the internet in order to call in and say, hey, is there anything for me to do? Do you have anything in your work queue for me? There's going to be some way to take remote control of that internal system in order to get it to execute on commands. And context matters. I've got a bullet item down the bottom here that says, is TeamViewer traffic good or evil? Well, that depends, right? I was involved with a threat hunt that was at a hospital. And one of the questions that was asked up front was, hey, do you run TeamViewer? And the answer was yes. We have TeamViewer running it on 2 servers. Great. And when we went through and did the hunt, we found TeamViewer running on, you guessed it, 14 servers. Ugh, ouch. So it turned out 2 instances of TeamViewer were acceptable business need. 11 of them were bad. 1 of them was really, really bad. 1 of them was access to a server that they used to contract a consulting company to manage that they fired for incompetency and didn't want to honor the contract because they had no clue what they were doing. It actually ended up going to court. And this company that tried to sue them for money still had remote access into their network. Nobody picked up on that until they went through and did a threat hunt. But you get the idea. So TeamViewer, is it good? Is it evil? It's all a matter of context, right? So that is an awful lot of what a threat hunter does, is not just identify that persistency of connection, not just identify, hey, this system is constant in communication with that one. It's figuring out, is there a business need behind this? Is this something that's acceptable behavior? Windows notification service. Every Windows system holds open a connection to those boxes 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's one of the things you're going to see in every network you go into. But it's doing that because it's a Windows box. Now, is there a business need for that? That's something that's an internal judgment call. If you're using software that requires that connectivity, yes. If you don't, it's just Windows doing its thing. Maybe you don't want to permit that. You need to go through, and it's that, the answer to that question is going to be different for every organization. So what does threat hunting replace? It actually replaces nothing. Because quite honestly, we've had nothing filling this role for a while. We've tried to do it with log analysis, and I talk about this in the level 1 threat hunting class, where, logging is something that we've been doing for many, many years. I would say it's probably, after login name password authentication, it's probably the oldest security technology we have. It was released in like 1988, and it really hasn't changed that much since then. It's just a conduit to be able to take log entries from a system and centralize collect them. And those logs don't necessarily have any security context to them. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is most logging is based on syslog. Syslog has no security severity level. It has an informational level, it has a debug level, it has a warning level. It doesn't have a security level, which means there's no way for me to predefine a log entry as being a security-related event. So the only way I have to figure that out is to try and pattern match on it, or human review them and Google the contents of it. And neither one of those scale really well. So we really haven't had anything in this slot to identify when protections failed and when we need to go into response mode. So this is why threat hunting is now filling in that role. So we're fairly new here. If you've never seen this chart before, this is Moore's technology adoption curve. It's used for software, but really you can use this to describe any new technology. And really what it talks about is all of those titles at the top, and innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority. These are all descriptors of different personality types. And that can be people, that can be companies, that can be a particular vertical within the company, like the security team. I'm reminded of a company I was working at one time that was bought by a much larger firm. And the day I knew I absolutely positively had to quit was when their security lead for the East Coast came in, and I noticed he used a flip phone, not because he was one of these tinfoil hat types and didn't want to be geolocated. If it was for that reason, I would have been okay with it. It was because, and his statement was exactly, I don't need anything else. This does everything I need. Okay, that's what we call a lagger, right? That's someone that just doesn't deal with technology until they absolutely positively had to. Now, if he told me, well, I don't want the government tracking me, yeah, all right, I think you're a little weird, but yeah, I can deal with that because at least it's, recognizing a valid need. To say that there's no technology I use that requires me to have more available to me than a flip phone, that tells me all the technology you use is out in that lagger category. Where you want to be as threat hunter, or really where you'd like to be within security as a whole, is in that early adopter phase. That's really where, innovator, you're never going to get any sleep. You'll be like Bill Stearns. Bill, I think, maybe sleeps 2 hours a night type of thing, and he's constantly playing with new technology all the time, which is why he is the skunk tank for our ACM. Anytime we need a new idea, Bill's the one to come up with it. But that early adopter phase, to be able to kind of look at, hey, is this technology have some good business function to it? Can we leverage that? That is a really good place to be with this stuff. Because, and I'll be honest, as security people, we tend to be more late majority. Shelby mentioned that, I used to be a SANS instructor, and I was a fellow SANS instructor for 15 years. What got me to leave SANS? I wanted to do a class on public cloud computing, and I was told, no, there's no reason for that. Public cloud security, that's easy. Just say no, don't do it. Everything should stay internal. This was probably 2010 when I wanted to go through and write that class. And when I started when that restriction hit me and started noticing some of the other restrictions that were hitting me, I basically said, I can't live like this. I need to innovate. I need to stay on the cutting edge. No. Public cloud will come, and we need to know how to secure it, and we need to start that conversation now. So that early adopter phase, that's really where you want to be. And we're just kind of moving past that right now. I'm starting to see a lot of folks coming into this field that I would label as early majority. And if you do some Googling, you can find descriptions of each of these categories if you really want to get down. So what soft skills does a threat hunter need? Needs to be a passion, not just a job. We hear that all the time. But, it means that. If you can kind of go through and say, here are some like regular day-to-day activities I'm going to be faced with, and they will always take priority over me honing my skills in this area, this might not be the best job for you, because there are a lot of skills to hone here. I got a slide on it coming up, but being able to decode what's going on in the network, being able to manage a SIM, there's a lot of different skills that on the surface seem unrelated that a threat hunter needs to be able to pull together to really run this stuff down. So there's a lot of work there. If that doesn't describe you, that's cool. Everybody's a little different. If you want to go to college for 4 years, learn a career, you can work until you're ready to retire. I always recommend accounting, because accounting is all based around, I think it's called the Bernoulli dual book system or something. That was developed about 2,000 years ago, and that technology really hasn't changed that much since then. So you can go to college for 4 years, learn what you need to be an accountant, and be in pretty good shape. Security is not that way. This field is constantly evolving. It's constantly changing. Yeah, I got a bullet here talking about is shifting security disciplines a feature, meaning that one of the things I've always loved about security is that when I started off, I was a firewall guy. And then I got into network-based intrusion detection, and then I got into decoding packets, and then I got into host-based forensics, and then I got into authentication, and my interest always kind of bounced around. There was always something shiny, public cloud. I mentioned that's what got me to go away from SANS. I developed a class on how to secure public cloud instances, and they had no interest in it, so I ended up going to the Cloud Security Alliance and going through and publishing it through them instead. But this constantly, and clearly I've moved on from public cloud since then. So, this shifting of disciplines, do you consider that a feature? If you do, yeah, this might be a good place for you to call home for a while. Because again, this is new, it's unique. We need leaders in this area, not just the folks of us that get on these webcasts. We need more than that. We need folks that'll advocate for attestations. PCI, SOC 2, ISO 27000, none of those have requirements around threat hunting, which to this day blows me away, right? I mean, think about like the 300 plus requirements that are in PCI. There is one control, I think it's an 11 dot something, that has anything at all to do with threat hunting, and that is a mandate to check your log for abnormal activity. Oh my God, what does that mean? Right? Should I be checking for sunspots? I mean, really, what does that mean? And I think what burns me about it with PCI more than anybody else is that PCI is very singular focused. It's on credit card transactions. So why can't you give me some examples of point of sale device logs that are an indication that they're now owned by somebody else and we need to go in incident handling mode? You should at least be able to give that for guidance, and there's nothing like that. So, folks to kind of help advocate within attestations to get this out. We need people doing that type of thing too. So there is a lot of work that needs to be done in this industry. This is why we do that level 1 threat hunting class, by the way. We got another one coming up in, I think, another week or so. We're going to run them monthly for a while because we really need to expand the number of people that understand threat hunting and what's going on in this field. Oh, I want to describe the third bullet a little bit. Being a bit compulsive can be a feature. What do I mean by that? I mean, there's, one of the things I talk to folks about is there's an IT mentality and there's a security mentality. And I'm not talking about just the job roles. People, typically have one of those two mentalities. If you're bad at IT or you're good but you're good at security, you're probably more along the lines of this bullet item, because that's where I fell. Because if you think about like IT, what's your role? Keep the network working. Is that router working right now? Yeah. Is traffic going through it? Yeah. Is there any bandwidth contention or anything? No. Well, then, heck, leave it alone. There's a problem someplace else you need to go address, right? So that IT mindset is to always kind of, where's the fire? Let me head to that. Security is different. Security is really about understanding the story of what you're looking at. Anytime I look at packets on the wire, I'm aware there's a story behind that. There's some sort of motivation to generate that traffic. What was that motivation? What was the problem this was trying to solve? I always want to try and understand that stuff. Go back a little over 20 years ago, and I was part of a team that was kind of monitoring for inconsistent traffic happening on government networks. And the whole concept was Y2K was coming. There was a concern that attackers might leverage Y2K to do bad things, but make it look Y2K related to kind of fly under the radar. So we had tickets coming in. We were doing research on different things people were finding. We had somebody submit some packet decodes that were ICMP type 3 unreachable. So we're host unreachable packets that were coming from the network address, .0. And we looked at that. I looked at that and I'm like, wait a minute. Why is the network saying the host is unreachable? That doesn't make any sense to me. And somebody else looked at it and said, oh, yeah, it's this blah, blah, blah. And now they spoke something out of their butt. They were completely wrong. But they were like, yep, no, this is fine. Nothing to worry about. Close the ticket. And I looked at it and I looked at it. And it's like, wait a minute. A host unreachable needs to come from a system. The network is not a system. What's going on here? I take it back. It was going to the network address. So that implied that the network sent a packet that now got a host unreachable returned in kind to it. And that makes no sense because networks don't transmit. Hosts on the network transmit, and they have some different address. And, I was checking to see, hey, maybe they supernetted the address space and that's actually a host address. No, it's not that. And it just bugged me because I couldn't understand the story. Turns out this was the first covert communication channel that was using ICMP, that was being used at large. And the reason they were using .0 was they were specifically targeting older Sun OS systems that still recognize .0 as the broadcast address, which means every one of them read that into memory, which meant one or more of them was compromised and it was hard to figure out which one it was. It was probably one of the most advanced attacks I saw taking place around 2000. But again, I didn't understand the story. That's why I didn't let it go. That's the only reason we caught it and we solved it. And I had other people trying to close it out saying, nope, let it go. It's not hurting anything. No. As a security person, you got to understand the story behind what's going on. So what technical skills you need? Well, I'm talking a lot about packet decoding. One of the things I love about the network is it's the great equalizer. If I'm monitoring all of my north-south traffic, meaning all the traffic going through my firewall and going out to the internet and then coming back through the internet through my firewall again, I get to see everything that's trying to communicate to the internet. Not just my desktops, not just my servers, but my routers, my Internet of Things devices, my BYOD devices. You get to see everything all at the same time. That's always been cool to me because while you can do a lot of cool stuff with EDR software, you're limited to what platforms you can install it on. What if you're one of these organizations that has but no choice, but they're still running like Windows 2003? I know there are sites out there still running it. They're paying Microsoft special money to patch when needed. The rest of us can say that's a 17-plus-year-old operating system. Why would anybody still run that? Yeah, they're still running that, which means you probably can't find any EDR software to run on it. So how do you protect it? Well, again, watching the network's equal opportunity. You could come up with an old DEC VAX, and by monitoring the network traffic, you can help monitor to make sure it's not in a compromised state. Log management, and host level logging. These are big parts of this as well. Because again, if I tag suspicious activity, I can try and run down and learn about the external IP and the internal IP, but at some point I may need to jump onto that host to be able to see what application's doing this. If it's Slack and we're a Slack shop, great. Now I know this is business need, this is probably okay. But if it's, something I don't recognize, like, calc is making these network connections. Oh, no, the calculator should not be making network connections. We've got a serious problem. I've got Scrum and Agile listed here, which might be kind of surprising for some people. The reasons Scrum and Agile are listed is because, to me, because we're still in learning mode with threat hunting, figuring out what works and what does not, we really need to follow an Agile process with that. We really need to be quick in coming up with testing to validate hypotheses we may have about what works and what doesn't, and figure out how to pivot off of that quickly to come up with something that does actually work. So we should constantly have tests. Oh, well, but Chris, we do that all the time. No, we don't. Centralized logging and alerting is a way to catch the bad guys. To me, is the indicator that no, we can be crazy. We can do the same thing over and over again and expect the same results, and not too many people are going to raise a red flag about it. Because really, besides us, how often do you hear people saying, hey, if you're doing centralized logging and you expect to find the bad guys, too bad. It's not going to work out for you well. And the data proves it. We're, like I said, 6 months between when an attacker gets a beachhead, because they made it past your protections, till when they're going to get detected. If centralized logging was working, that would be less than 24 hours. And it's not. It's much higher than that. So again, we need to be able to tune this process as quickly as possible. Understanding the attack matrix, that's a big one about with this too. Understanding all these steps that an attacker goes through, and where are your opportunities for detecting them? This is actually where the HoneyNet project came from. Lance Spencer, JD Glazier, and myself used to chat online. And one of the things we were chatting about was, what's a bad guy do once they get in? And it was like, well, what do you mean? And it's like, well, we do pen testing. So my process is, sign contract, break into the client's network, cash paycheck. And the bad guys probably have a different process than that. And we didn't really know the answer to that question. That's where the HoneyNet came from. We started setting up systems, letting people break into it and watching, what do they do? Are there other steps in the process? Let's say they have a 0 day. So patching isn't going to keep them out. Is there someplace else in the process where we can catch them? Layered defense and all of that. That's one of the reasons you really want to learn the attack matrix, because there are multiple opportunities to detect the bad folks once they get onto your network, and you want to make sure you're leveraging every layer as best you can. What tools should you learn? I love Zeek. Zeek is probably like one of my favorite things in the world. Well, so I have to say probably third or fifth favorite things in the world, because my daughter is on this call and, I have a grandchild from her. So if I don't put those before Zeek, I'll get in trouble for it later, especially at Sunday dinner. But, pulls family out of it, Zeek is my favorite. It's just really cool. If you're not familiar with Zeek, it makes a recording of all your network traffic that goes by. And unlike a PCAP, it stores just the stuff we as security people care about and does it in about 1/20th the storage requirements of a full PCAP. But it'll give you almost as much data as a PCAP will. That's pretty cool. Wireshark, T-Shark is really good for going through and dealing with decodes. Rita is great for going through and finding, what looks like beacon traffic, what looks like long connections on your network, which are all indicators of command and control. Hey, someone's taken over one of your internal systems and, they're communicating to a command and control server out on the internet. Rita was designed to be able to catch that type of activity. Sysmon, that's a really cool tool. I think we tend to overuse it. We kind of get in this mode of, well, if a little bit's good, a lot is just enough. So we tend to monitor everything we possibly can with Sysmon in the hopes that we can catch the bad guys. We've had really good luck running Sysmon and just looking at event ID 3s. If you don't know what event ID 3s are off the top of your head with Sysmon, they are applications that have created network connections. So think about all the local process execution. You don't care about that unless the system gets compromised. And if the system gets compromised, it's going to start reaching out to the network, whether it be out to its command and control server or laterally to try and go after and attack other internal systems. By monitoring just the apps creating network connections, you're going to see that. Audit D, similar type of thing, but on the Linux side. We can go through and we can monitor the same types of things. I mentioned syslog and an elk and SEMA your choice. In other words, if you're going to go through and collect these log entries, you need some way to be able to go through and manage them. How do you develop your skills? In other words, so where do I get started? Like, okay, Chris, you convinced me threat hunting sounds cool. I want to start building some skills in this area. What do I do? Step one, get a home network going. I know that sounds basic, but quite honestly, I think every tech person on this call who's working behind the scenes on this call, this is how we all started. Set up a couple systems at home and see what you can do and break them, right? If you want to be able to try to identify things that look like command and control, monitor your home network. The nice thing about that is if you take your home network offline, it's not your job on the line. Your significant other and your kids might have some crosswords with you, and then that'll be the end of it, and you're good to go from there. But this is a great way to learn. Leverage Raspberry Pis. These are really inexpensive computers that you can go through and you can use to go through and capture traffic, process PCAPs. There's a ton of different use cases for these things. Leverage free training. We offer quite a bit, like these webcasts. I keep mentioning the level 1 course that we're running next week. That's 6 hours of training. And it's not just, hey, let's talk at you and, we're going to try and sell you a product the whole time. We don't do that. It is 6 hours of training. There's probably, there's 5 minutes at the end where I kind of dog and pony, hey, here's what our commercial product looks like. But that's 5 minutes out of 6 hours. And oh, by the way, a good portion of that class is hands-on labs. Hey, So let's go into this PCAP and let's work on vetting out this threat hunting process. Here's how to do it. Here's the tools to use. Here's the techniques to use. So, go out and find some training. Test your setup. This is a very cool tool, thank you, Bill Stearns, called Beacon Simulator. So let's say you think you're already threat hunting on your network. If you can't catch this, you're not threat hunting. So what does Beacon Simulator do? Beacon Simulator simulates a beacon. Hey, that sounds pretty straightforward, right? The syntax for it is pretty straightforward. I run Beacon Simulator. I identify where do I want my traffic to go, what port do I want it to connect to, what interval do I want a beacon at, and how much jitter do I want to throw into that. See this command down the bottom where I'm running Beacon Simulator and I'm running it at acm.re? Don't send it to that. That's our website. But the 43, 900, 180 parameter there, that's sunburst, right? That is the level of hiding that the Russians were doing as part of sunburst. If you can't catch this type of activity on your network, you're not going to catch the next iteration of whatever sunburst turns into after this. If you think you're doing threat hunting today, this will go through and this will vet that out. We've seen sites where the network people say, hey, we need to start doing threat hunting to catch adversaries. And the people running the centralized logging say, oh, hey, we already do that. So they'll go through, they'll set up a beacon signal. The logging people don't catch it and say, hey, you didn't catch this. This is what I'm talking about. We need to be able to detect this type of thing. And then they go off and they write a signature that's just specific to that one test case and say, oh, no, we wrote a new signature, we're fine. And then they go up and you just change the beacon to be something else. And of course, they miss that. And after about the third to fifth time you go around with them on that, they figure out, yeah, hey, maybe what we're doing isn't the best way to try to catch this stuff. But this is a great tool. Thank you, Bill. Oh, also, that top link, that's a webcast that we did a while back on how to go through and test your threat hunting platform. This is also a great way to test your tools and techniques. That's really what this thing is about. So go in, simulate this type of traffic that an adversary might connect on your network and see, do you detect it? If not, why not? Where are those holes and how are you going to fill them? All right, so I wanted to mix things up this time. I wanted to go through and I want to do a little bit of gameplay. So here's what we're going to do. I am going to pop up a slide that has something on it that kind of indicates, yeah, this might be a compromised system on our network. We may have a situation where someone has made it past all of our protections, they've compromised an internal host, and we may have just detected their command and control channel that's heading out to the internet. What I want you to do is I want you to look at the slide, see what you can figure out is wrong. Some of them have one thing wrong. Some of them have multiple things that are wrong. Figure out what's wrong, post it in Discord. You get bragging rights if you do it first, especially if you do it first consistently before everybody else through all of the questions. Post that into Discord. For packets, assume everything is describing northwest traffic, meaning that we're monitoring like right off of the internal interface of a firewall. So this is traffic that's being captured going between the internal network and the internet and back in type of thing. Okay, great. So here is our first one. So let me describe what I did, and then I'll let you go through the data to kind of figure it out from there. I want to make sure I give you some context. So what I'm doing is I'm going through a Zeek log file that's for the previous day. So this is 24 hours worth of data. And I'm telling it, I want to see any DNS queries and what type of query was it that was performed. I've got some sort unique, rev, cut, rev, sort taking place here. All that's doing is just stripping out any host names that might appear so that I can go through and I can correlate everything down to the domain level. And then I'm going through and just printing out, hey, how many matches do we have for each records? So in the Discord channel, tell me what's weird about this. I'll give everybody a little bit to kind of post in. Also, there tends to be a little bit of a lag between posting in Discord versus like when I'm talking. So I'm going to give you a little bit to take a look at this. Somebody says DNS C2, Braindance. Why am I not surprised it was Braindance came up with that first? Cool. Yes, but what is it you see that kind of speaks that to you. CNAME subdomain, expand on that just a little bit. Different records for same host. So these aren't for that host. So honest, I'm not evil, ne.jp are domains. There was a host within the domain that was being queried. I just simply stripped that off because I wanted to see what queries were going to the domain and what type of query were they. Large text record file. So we don't know what the size was of the text record file. All we know is that there was 692 of them. So that's not size, that's quantity. That's how many times we did a text query for one or more hosts within honestimnotevil.com yesterday. Large number of text records, yep, there is. IPv6 to any Japan, yeah, we did have one attempt at that. Different records, different commands, that's a possibility. High number of DNS requests. Let's see, the amount of queries to the quad A PTR records. So we had one of each. All right, so let's kind of start at the bottom and work our way up. We had a failed query. We don't know what was going on there. This here was a reverse lookup on an IP address. Okay, systems do a reverse lookup sometimes. This doesn't trouble me, and there's only one of them. We've got an A query and a quad A query within any.japan. So that to me says we were trying to get to some host in that domain. We probably tried to do it via IPv6 first. When that didn't work, we did an A record query to get the IP of that address, and then that worked okay. So these are all kind of lost leader. I tossed these in just because they look a little odd. The honest, I'm not evil is really where things look like they're kind of odd here. So the first thing that sticks out to me about honest, I'm not evil, why is there no A record queries? In other words, what's the most common query we're going to do? The most common query is, I know the fully qualified domain name of the host I want to get to. I don't know its IP address. An A query, like we see here, is an attempt to find that IP address. We're never trying to find an IP address. We're looking up MX records, which is, hey, I want to find the mail server for this domain. Okay, that's a lot of mail server lookups, right? Why are there so many mail server lookups? I should be able to learn it and then cache it for some period of time. I wouldn't expect to see more MX queries versus anything else. There's a lot of text queries, and as a couple of folks have pointed out, text queries are a common indicator of C2 over DNS, but we can see we get a lot. It isn't just text queries that can be used. I actually did this on purpose and had it break it out evenly just to show you, yeah, it could just as easily be MX records, it could just as easily be CNAME records. So this is C2 over DNS. So some folks found that. The fact that there are so many queries going to this domain is another indicator for me. I mean, if we do some quick addition here, we went through and we did about 2,000 plus queries in that domain over the previous day. To honestimnotevil.com. I've never heard of that domain before. I could understand a lot of queries going to google.com or amazon.com or Akamai or Microsoft or one of those large organizations that has a real internet presence to it. But for domains I don't recognize, I might see 10 queries a day and that's it. 2,000 seems like an awful lot. So that's one of the things that grabbed me. The fact that there's no A record queries, that grabs me. So, what is this? This is DNS being used as command and control. Yeah, it can happen over text records, but as we see here, it can also happen over MX and CNAME. And oh, by the way, I could have just used MX or just used CNAME if I wanted to. I wanted to make this one a little bit weird. My favorite is DKIM. You can use DKIM to hide that command and control channel as well. Cool, so a couple of folks got this. This is awesome. All right, here's our next one. So our next one is, I'm going in and I'm looking up an IP address, right? So I was going through my connection log within Zeek. So again, this is looking at all the traffic that took place yesterday. And I see one of my internal IP addresses in here, 99.51, connected to an IP address out on the internet, this 104 address. It connected to TCP port 80, and Zeek saw an HTTP header. So that meant there was a valid user agent, valid URI. It looks like real HTTP traffic. So we know it's not somebody just tunneling out of port 80. It's real HTTP traffic. So I saw this. It got my interest, so I started looking up that IP address in other logs. What's interesting about the entries we see or don't see in the other logs? Go in and give this one a shot. Braindan says URL-based exfil. That is definitely a possibility, but what's grabbing your attention to tell you, yeah, this is definitely not normal traffic? Weird GET requests. Yeah, we're seeing the same GET request over and over again. So there were actually hundreds of these, but we can see 2 that are identical that are taking place. And see this down here, 200 OK? This tells me the web server is saying, yep, that was a valid URL for you to request from me. That's a very odd looking URL, isn't it? LDAPs, base64, it could be. User agent string. So if we look at the user agent string, it's Windows 7. Is that even still around with Mozilla 4, Java 1.7? Oh, hey, wouldn't we all love to be trying to support Java 1.7 again? That wouldn't make our networks any more vulnerable, right? Yeah, this is looking like really old software. I'm surprised to see that being used as a user agent on the network today. But that definitely looks suspicious. No DNS, so this is a direct connection to an IP address. Could be a web shell. Oh, Devda. Awesome observation. So here I grepped the IP address out of DNS.log, and we didn't get any information back. What that tells us is nobody looked up a fully qualified domain name to get to this IP address. Now, they could have done a direct IP connection. They could have done the lookup over DNS over TLS. We don't know which, but the fact that that DNS record wasn't there makes me suspicious. What makes me even more suspicious is this field right here. This is the host parameter in the URI. This should be a fully qualified domain name. It should identify the fully qualified domain name I was trying to get to. And it doesn't. It just has an IP address listed. That's odd. That should not be happening. So yeah, so one of the comments was this looks like encoded command and control, could even be PowerShell. Absolutely. I think we got some base64 or something encoding a command string in this whole thing. This is why we see the same thing going off and over again. What are the clues to get us there? We didn't try to look up anything to get there. The host string has IP address instead of a fully qualified domain name. The URI string looks very long and convoluted. The system's still accepting it anyway. And oh, by the way, it looks like it's running an operating system that hopefully nobody's using. All of those things combined together tell me, yeah, this is really suspicious and we need to get out of this rabbit hole. Tacoma is saying, hey, maybe Google that directory string. Absolutely. And if you do that, you'll figure out what this actually was. That's one of the few cute clues you can go in and do a search on. Cool. So some folks got that. All right, here's your next one. Your next one's pretty similar, right? It is an internal system going to an external system, TCP port 80, and it looks like it's HTTP traffic. SYNFIN, so it was a complete 3-packet handshake. Here's what came back out of that. Tell me what's odd about this one. Let's see, Tire Fire. Oh, I love that name. It's definitely not base64. It's not the right characters, but yeah, it looks like some sort of encoding. Yeah, I agree, dude, definitely. So what's kind of odd about this one? It's HTTP, not HTTPS. Yeah, so that actually is kind of one of the first things for me, right? Today, we really don't use HTTP anymore. In fact, one of the ones I was looking at before had a referrer field. So the referrer field identifies where was the user before they ended up on your website. And it's great for checking, like, what were people Google searching for? You know, what terms were they searching for that brought them to your website? And the referrer field was http://www.google.com. Well, Google doesn't use HTTP anymore. It uses HTTPS. So yeah, any time we see HTTP, get suspicious right off the bat. IE, yes. So I have never seen this user agent string before. Microsoft Internet Explorer doesn't get written out that way. There's no operating system listed here. There's no additional modules listed here. That user agent string looks totally bogus to me. So yeah, that's something we can clue in on there. Let's see, PTR record query. So I grep for the IP address and I got my command prompt back, which tells me, okay, someone did not look up a fully qualified domain name to get this IP, but hey, at least our host parameter has a fully qualified domain name in it, right? So that looks a little bit more normal. So if I go in and I do a PTR record lookup on that IP address, it comes back and says there's no host associated with that IP. That's kind of odd. Then I did a query on the fully qualified domain name the user was supposedly trying to get to when they went to this IP, and that has no record associated with it. In other words, this query should have returned this IP address, and it doesn't. That tells me this is bogus. Notice anything interesting about the domain they're trying to get to. Localhost DNS compromise. I don't think it's necessarily DNS, but I think you're right. I think we've got a command and control channel here that we're looking at. Domain typo squatting. Yes, I would totally agree with that. I would totally agree with that. Because look at this. Skype.com.ty, that's a valid domain. Skypetm.com.ty, no, that's not the Skype. This is not the Skype you think it is. So this is somebody who's kind of playing around trying to hide what they're doing. So again, there was a number of hints in this one too. A lot of folks got this typo squatting. Yep, I agree. Good caught, good catch. All right, here's another one. So we need to check our network for long connections. In other words, we want to see, are any of our systems in constant contact? They never close the connection down with systems out on the internet. What's going to give us the most accurate results for that? Will it be A, Zeek in the con.log file that Zeek creates, B, T-Shark with its summary conversations that we can go through and create with the -Z switch, maybe summarizing based on IP or TCP or both, or C, yeah, you can actually use either one of these. It just depends on the data you have available. So if you have PCAPs available, go ahead and use T-Shark. If you have Zeek available, go ahead and use Zeek. Which one's going to give us the most accurate data and why? D, Netstat. Now, Netstat is not an option here because we're looking at the network to try and catch all of them. .ty Taiwan, yes it is. C, you can use any of them. C, you can use any of them. C, A, Zeek, C, T-Shark. I see a lot of C's. I see folks saying that C is the way to go. D, Zeek piping data to Rita. Yeah, Doug, I would agree with that one. That's probably the easiest way to get this done. So the answer is, drum roll, A. Zeek will give you very accurate information about what's going on. If the connection has stalls in it, meaning that it communicates for a while and stops, then communicates for a while and stops, Zeek will make it look like a beacon instead of a long connection, but you can fix that by increasing the TCP timeout in Zeek from 5 minutes up to like an hour or something like that. That should cover you no problem. I like to set it to 4 hours just to be really sure. But doing that, that'll catch it. T-Shark Conversations does it statically. What do I mean by that? I mean, let's say I have let's say I have my internal system talking to an external system, and it only sends 2 packets. It sends 1 packet right at the beginning of that 24-hour PCAP and 1 packet at the end of that conversation, and it's different ports, and it's all part of a completely different session. T-Shark Conv IP will record that as being a 24-hour conversation, even though it wasn't. I had a conversation that started and stopped, maybe it was only 10 milliseconds long at the beginning of the 24 hours. And then those IP addresses talked to each other again for, 10 milliseconds and then stopped, or let's call it 100 milliseconds and then stopped. That should be 200 milliseconds of communication time. But Conv will look at it and say, I saw the IP here with this date timestamp. I saw the IPs here with that date timestamp. Therefore, 24 hours worth of communication, which is actually wrong. If you do it with TCP instead, that will help clean some of that up. But if you get a port number that repeats, it'll make the same mistake. So again, if I'm using, let's say I do 2 connections to TCP/80 on a remote system and I only communicate for 100 milliseconds. And there's 1 conversation at the start of the 24 hours, 1 conversation at the end of the 24 hours. If the port numbers are different, it will record them as 2 different sessions and properly log that as being 200 milliseconds of communication. If the port numbers just happen to be the same, because, hey, we do reuse port numbers sometimes, it'll blow it and record the whole thing as a 24-hour conversation. So T-Shark is okay to kind of get a ballpark figure, but you don't want to count on the data being accurate. Zeek is the way to go. And as somebody posted, Zeek, feed that into Reader, and yeah, that'll give it to you too. But it's because Zeek is going to give you the most accurate information. Chris, what interview questions and answers would be the best to predict a candidate's ability to do the threat hunting job successfully? Hey, I would start with these slides. I would put these slides in front of them and say, hey, what's wrong with this picture? And if they can't tell you, yeah, that's not a good place to start. If PCAP log file is not available, then no use of Zeek. So I think C is right, depends on data available. Well, yes and no heuristic. B will give you some data, but it won't necessarily be accurate. I can do that, you know? So tell you what, if you're not sure, ask me, I'll tell you 5. It's 5. And that'll be about as accurate as what you can get out of T-Shark sometimes, unfortunately. If all you have is PCAPs, Zeek will read PCAPs, and it'll generate the correct traffic for you. Brim is really cool. I haven't tried it, so that could be a cool tool. Can we get a full list of topics covered in advanced network threat hunting? So most of advanced network threat hunting is actually labs. I do a little bit of talking in the beginning, and then I shut up, and we start off baby steps. I take people through one step in the threat hunting process at a time, talking through things. Most of it is actually, hey, here's a PCAP, tell me what's going on. And then you have to actually remember what process to go through, and then we'll go through and we'll cover that. Let's see, did I pass the hidden John Strand test? Yeah, maybe. That's why it's nice having this stuff in Discord. All right, and we are 4 minutes over. So I kept talking too much. I apologize for that. Let's see. Here's our next threat hunter training. Yay. So please feel free to sign up for that. And if you got any questions, that's what the Discord channel is for. So Shelby, if you're not too afraid, feel free to come back in and wrap things up if you'd like.
Awesome. And for anyone who didn't get the John Strand test joke, John Strand does 3 different pay what you can classes at Wild West Hacking Fest. And somehow this inside joke got started about people saying, is this going to be on the test? And John will say, no, there is no tests. We don't do tests, just, hands-on labs. And people still, joke around with him and say, well, will this be on the test? So that is where that came from. If anyone is interested in a demo of our commercial product, you can type demo into the GoToWebinar or the Discord chat, and we'll reach out to you to talk more about AC Hunter. And I'm going to go ahead and share the training link for the level 1 free threat hunt training in Discord as well, because I can see a few people right now asking about that too. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us, especially if this was your first webcast with us. Welcome to the Threat Hunter community, and hopefully we will see you all in the next one.
Thank you, folks. Appreciate your time today.